the two things, well, one thing that we're not going to talk about is Brexit, because Markus made the point that if the UK leaves Europe, it's going to be a very male-dominated place. So we're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
Everyone's tired, we need some fresh air, we need to move, so let's just have an exciting few conversations about what we think works well in terms of building a social innovation ecosystem in Europe, what's supportive already in our ecosystem, and what we need to have more of. And the reason I think this is a particularly interesting conversation for us is that I think the rest of the world quite often looks to Europe as a very advanced, socially innovative place. We have the wonderful European Commission doing amazing things, right? And supporting things. And one of the things that I think is really interesting that's very unique to Europe is the fact that so much money has been put into developing a shared narrative. So despite the fact that we have 27 different languages spoken, we do have a shared narrative on what we mean by social innovation. So we tend to be able to go beyond definitions when we're talking together. And then, of course, there's lots and lots of money that is put into developing networks. Not necessarily all right, but I don't know anywhere else in the world that puts as much money into network development as the European Commission. And for me, one of the most important things about an ecosystem, or one of the most important elements of an ecosystem, is having neutral conveners to make networks work so people can learn from each other more quickly. Of course, I would say that. So I think there's some really, really amazing stuff happening in Europe. But maybe we start with Gorka, and you tell us from your perspective what you think makes the social innovation ecosystem work so well in Europe, and then we'll move on. But let's celebrate a little bit what we have already, because I think we're very lucky.
Okay, I'll take the positive hat.
Go positive first, and then we can be a bit negative after.
I agree with you that there are two main positive elements, I think, on the table. One is that Europe has embraced this narrative of social transformation that is part of our legacy. But again, we go back to narratives and culture that was discussed this morning, and how important it is. And there is, in my experience, a collective acceptance that the current model is not working anymore. And it is not working, and we need to reinvent the model. Because in some ways, Europeans feel that we created this model, so we need to reinvent it. And that is something really powerful, because when the European Commission says, inclusive growth, this is this is what we want to achieve, probably when you enter into details about what that means for each of the members is different. But there is kind of a common aspiration that is not just growth. We are looking for social transformation, social justice, social innovation. And I think that's really positive. And that I'm trying to limit the critics for the second part. So that's kind of the really positive. And the second element, what is very positive, is that in Europe, I think most of the actors, non-governmental, government, and private, also have accepted the complexity of the task. So when we talk about this, that's why it's easier to fund networks, to fund the research, because there is a general understanding that the linear way of looking at social innovation is not working anymore. So we don't know exactly how to manage that complexity, but we accept the complexity. And I think that's a fundamental difference still. And the final point for me is that we are also challenging the myth of the individual entrepreneur, that the whole innovation model is normally built around the idea, and again, the narrative and the vision that there are very special and talented people that are the ones who can make innovation. And actually, we know in Europe that most, as Charlie was explaining this morning, that behind all real innovation, there is a collective action. And that unless we understand this complexity and we create structures for collective action, structures are not going to change. So, and this, I think this critique of the myth of the individual entrepreneur in Europe is stronger than in other places.
Thanks, Gorka. Gianluca, how much do you agree? And also, let's just stick on the positive stuff. Like, what's great?
Yeah, I mean, to take the positive side, probably we need to start from the negative one, because...
Or we could just do the positive for a minute.
Although, because, I mean, connected to what Gorka said, I mean, I consider, despite I work in the European Commission, I consider myself a policy entrepreneur. Because, I mean, in all my career, I always try to change the system from within. That it's very difficult. I'm coming from Florence, where we had last week the State of the Union. And of course, we are living in Europe in a very, let's say, interesting time. And we have a very strong crisis of legitimacy at the European level, at the national levels, and also at the local levels, with a lot of, movement and populism, etc. And we all know that. But on the other side, this is, I mean, Talia is not here anymore, but what I always try to, and last week I was teaching in the school of my daughter that is 5 years old about the Europe Day on the 9th of May, that actually is not yet an official, let's say, celebration in Europe, but that should be just to remember us what we have achieved collectively as EU. And all the topic of the State of the Union was about the solidarity that is actually the underpinning principle of the EU itself. And so if we look at the progresses that we have done, despite the crisis of legitimacy, so Talia is very right in pointing this out and being vocal about that. But on the other side, we have been progressing a lot in the last centuries, and I mean, we haven't already eradicated some of the dire societal challenges, but we have progressed quite well in some areas, and we have, still a lot of disparities and inequalities, but we can say that, for instance, in some areas like research and innovation, also because of the investment and the changes also in the approaches within the EU, we have achieved quite a lot. And this is one of the areas that I would definitely, not just to please my colleague that ran the Smart Specialization program in Seville, where I'm based, but there is a focus that has been changing over time in terms of the cohesion policy and the regional development, trying to be more specialistic and focalizing on innovation. That is really the engine for growth and development. And in this sense, what is important, and there are many examples we all see, you all know the Alto Innovation Garden, the entrepreneurial universities, the triple or quadruple helix approaches. It's very important that academia and private sector and the third sector and the private sector, they all work together. What is not necessarily always the case, and this will be one of maybe the negative part, because...
Not yet.
Not yet, but instead, a positive issue is that what we have been looking at, the social innovation part, is also the digital component. Right. That is a very fundamental change maker. And this is, in fact, where I cannot but agree with let's say, the guru of the social innovation, Jeff, that we should really, we are already working hard to do that, but we should really exploit and make the most of digital data and collective intelligence. And probably we are not yet there. And final point that is to preparing for the ground, maybe also for another aspect, is the investing and the financing model that maybe that definitely, as my colleague Philippe said this morning, is also focusing in this area quite strongly. But we have to be careful.
Okay. Thanks, Gianluca. Well, Markus, over to you. You're from the Bosch Foundation, so tell us about what you think works well. Something positive.
Something positive.
Something positive, please.
You know, I'm German.
I know, this is perfect.
Anything positive now for the opening, usually. Okay. But of course, I have a different perspective on this topic than Gianluca from the European Commission, for example. From a private donors perspective, and historian by education myself, it's hard for me to talk about success at the moment. I think the whole movement, the whole topic is still very young to see if there has happened real system changes around Europe in the last years. But I think three things are very important for a successful social innovation ecosystem. These are reason, trust, and cross-sectoral. The first of all is you need a reason why you want to change something. I say this because sometimes I have the impression that social innovation is a new buzzword. Yeah? So it's plopping in, everybody's talking about, and we have thousands of definitions. It's very important that the European Union, European Commission supports a lot these initiatives with the framework, with also financial support. But at the end of the day, we should have a common sense what should be changed and which ecosystem is needed for this and which kind of innovation is needed for this. Second is the cross-sectoral. The experience I made in my daily work, if it's social innovation or classical grant-making philanthropy, is you can't solve any problem, any challenge, if you don't work cross-sectoral. That means involve the civil society, the social entrepreneurs, the economy, the administration, the media, the academia. If you're in your silo, even if your silo is beautiful and big, you will lose or fail at the end of the day. And the third one is to reach this, you need trust. You need more than just mutual understanding. You need trust, and this is also a question of time to build this trust upon all the actors in this field.
All right, thanks, Markus. So let's go to just very short from each of you. Not negative things, but things that would help support social innovation more in the European context. We'll go back around, actually. So what would help?
Yeah, I think Markus has already pointed out very important elements. If I have to choose two, I think
you do have to choose two.
One is we don't have real instruments for understanding what people and communities want and need today. Most of the social innovation initiatives are based on expert analysis, mostly quantitative, that is not telling us what people want and is demanding. So therefore, we are taking actions, policy actions, but also in the non-for-profit sector, that are not really understanding what is needed. And then we see things happening, we get angry with why people don't respond, and there is, I think, a real need for incorporating the cultural dimension into the social innovation platforms in a more rigorous way. And we can talk about that tomorrow because there are very interesting experiences about how to do that. But that's, for me, a key element. And the second element is that we are still discussing about social innovation and competitiveness in different tables. We have the serious guys, the guys who control, who know best, talking about competitiveness, and we have the nice guys who make money, who lose money, talking about social innovation in another table. And what we know is that the real systems that work are those who are integrating social innovation and competitiveness at the same table. Same actors, same narratives, and same actions, or interconnected actions. And I think at the moment, Europe is losing the leadership in this field because we used to do that in the past, and we are not doing it anymore. So that will be my kind of next challenge for all of us.
Brilliant, thanks, Gorka. One or two things, Gianluca?
Yes, well, then in that case, I change my hat and take the researcher hat, also considering what Robert said. And indeed, we understand and we know that it's not all, let's say, good out there. But I think there are two issues that are fundamental if we want to really make change and not just being, let's say, comfortable in our rhetoric. One is the evidence, the lack of evidence in this field, and this is what we're trying to address, going beyond, the anecdotal, this works well project, but rather be more systematic and trying to link, the interventions to real system change and impact. And on the other side, the issue that is also now becoming the new buzzword in this field of the social impact investing. And that's why it's very important what was said this morning, that we managed with a lot of effort, my senior colleagues much more than me, in pushing and convincing to put a starting 4 billion euros as a leverage, let's say, guarantee for social innovation in the proposal of the EU budget that will be under discussion. But I actually actually suggest everyone to have a look at, because also there are some innovation in terms of, for instance, the respect of the rule of law. That is something in Europe we should reconsider much harder than we do at the moment, as well as other in terms of how we really want to be united in our diversity. On the other side, on the impact investing, we've been studying the situation in Europe, and we see that actually this market, and I use the word market by purpose, is very fragmented. And the supply and demand side need an orchestration from the public sector side. As Gorka was saying, and also from the evidence we have, the success story actually are those where you have an institutionalization process of the social innovation, not rather you know, an innovative idea.
Thanks, Gianluca. Markus.
Yeah, so one advice, one thing which is important for success. We shouldn't forget that if we talk about ecosystems, system change, social innovation, we talk about people. We don't talk about technical systems or an engine. We talk about human beings involved in these processes as subjects or as objects. And sometimes I'm a little bit afraid I have the impression that we talk like this is a technical project, you put this in and clack, and the perfect result at the end of the day. And we see, especially in Europe in the last years, in elections, for example, that doesn't work. People are afraid, especially if they are confronted with change. And even if this is change for good. If you have a look on a company or an organization and you want to make a complete change management with them, you usually only have two groups which are happy about the change. The new stuff, the very young ones coming from the university saying, oh yeah, let's change something, and the CEOs, because they have to deliver. And all the 80% in between, sometimes they are afraid to lose something. And this is the question, if we want to change something, what we should preserve? What was good? What should be transferred in the system change? And maybe this is also an answer to a very important point James from Canada, from the Montreal University, mentioned when he talked about the gap between the mega cities and the smaller cities and the countryside. And we have also this gap in this whole social innovation ecosystem. And I see a huge danger if we don't find bridges to bridge this gap.
Thanks, Markus. I think I just wrap up by saying how much I agree with this, but I think also this idea about diversity and things coming from different places, clearly it's not a money issue. We have enough money, the same people get it every time. Or it's directed at the same things. Backbone institutions and the kind of thing that you were talking about, Gorka, I think is where we need to redirect our money. I'm going to be fired. We need to go. Thank you. Thank you all.